and we're out taking a walk one day, and we're in a goat pasture in Wales, and I'm standing in goat with this guy who was the head of the studio, and he was a real character. He said, "So, how much?" I said, "How much what, Ken?" He was the studio head. "How much for you to quit your day jobs and do this full-time freelance for us?" And Ray and I had talked about the dream of what if we were full-time video game designers, and we had a number in mind. And so I said, let me think a minute. I have to calculate. And then I just told him twice the number, twice Ray's number. And I see Ray starting to vibrate. And and the guy goes, "What? That's more than I make." And I said, "Yeah, we're the talent." And he just put out his hand, and I shook it, and I said, "Could I talk to my partner for a minute?" And he went back, squishing across the poop into his house. And Ray turns to me and says, "What did you do, man?" So I got us into video games. And I said, "Hey, Ray, uh, what's a pixel?"
Hello, welcome back to We Thought It Would Be Easy, the podcast where we talk about creativity in entertainment mediums, games, board games, video games, movies, TV shows, and beyond. I'm Jonathan Grant, sometime game developer and game designer. I am here with my host, legendary game designer, Jordan Weisman. We are back,
Yeah, it's
and
just
I'm
you're using that code phrase for old again. I get it. Go ahead, keep going.
and I'm going to hand it over to Jordan to introduce this week's guest. Jordan,
Thank you,
let's dive
Jonathan.
in. Got me.
All right, yeah, giving me shit about saying that a lot. Anyway, I am extremely excited to welcome Mitch Gitelman to the show today. Mitch, how do I put this? Mitch is one of the great love affairs of my life. Um, uh, and I've just had the incredible pleasure of working with him and being his friend for decades now. He says we met when he was like 12.
I was
It's-
15 and you were 21.
okay, so yeah, and at a Gen Con of all places. But we didn't get the pleasure to start working together until Virtual World Entertainment, which was a chain of virtual reality entertainment centers that we had built in the late 80s, early 90s. And Mitch joined us to work on a new title that we were going to add to the platform, which at the time we were calling Corsairs. It was a 1930s aerial adventure, which we had a lot of fun working on all of the concept docs for and design docs for, and then never actually got to make. I then resurrected that a lot of that stuff and put it into the property that became known as Crimson Skies, which I did originally as a board game and then video games. Mitch and I worked on many video games together, starting with MechCommander, and then he went off and took the reins on MechCommander 2 and made it a much better game, and went on to lead FASA Studio at Microsoft. And then most importantly, at least to me, was our time, a decade we spent together at Harebrained Schemes, creating some of the most special games I've ever had the privilege to be part of. So with all of that, welcome, Mitch. Thank you for taking time to talk to us.
How could I not, especially with an intro like that?
Mitch,
So,
I got to meet you at Microsoft Game Studios very briefly. We never worked together, but I remember Jordan saying like, "Oh, you
Was I
got to
nice
meet
to
this
you?
guy." Sorry, what? Were
So
you
was I
nice?
nice to you? That was not exactly the era of me behaving well.
Well, it was not exactly the era of me enjoying work. But Jordan, I remember was like, I think I like called Jordan or messaged him to sort of like kvetch, and he was like, "Look, just go meet this guy, Mitch. You'll feel better." And you were nice to me. Yeah, you were super nice. You were warm and you counseled me well.
Cheers. Glad I could help. I want to be of service.
So Mitch, I'm gonna take you back in the Wayback Machine, you and Sherman and Peabody and myself, and we're gonna go back and remember the days before video games, because that you started in the paper games industry like myself. So let's talk about that a little bit and your joy and pain of creating in a simpler era.
Oh my God, it was simple as hell. Especially, well, I mean, role-playing games, there's no code. Just right there. You don't have to find the fun quite as hard. So yeah, I loved making paper and pencil role-playing games. That was a delight. There was no pain involved in that at all. I was working with Mayfair Games in the Chicago area where you were with FASA uh, Corp. And I was working on this game called Underground, Ray Winninger's Underground. The artist put his name on the cover. Underground. And that was, I think, the first four-color RPG. And that was like a big deal. But it basically predicted the future we're in. So,
Oh,
whoops.
so your fault.
Yes. I blame Ray Winninger.
Well, he put his name on it, so yeah, you should be able to blame him. you know. But you and Ray were creative partners for many years.
We've been creative partners on three different companies. We got into video four. Oh shit. It was paper and pencil role playing games. We collaborated on that underground game, and then he and I went into video games together. Um, there it is. Yeah, with Sony Interactive Europe, and made a game with them. And then later on, he and I worked together at Microsoft in Microsoft Game Studios. Then he worked at Harebrained Schemes.
Yeah, worked with us at Hairbrains on
Yeah, so that's
Golem
four
Arcana.
companies, geez.
All
Oh, I
right,
didn't
you
know
gotta
that he
at
was
least
at Hairbrain.
yeah for like a year and a half.
Yeah, that's right. He helped
Cool.
ship Polymark.
Yeah, on Golem Arcana. Yeah. All right, but I want to go back to Sony Interactive because this to me captures you in all of your essence. The incredible chutzpah of how you got that deal. And worth speaking to, people who are trying to get into the creative industry to understand just how big your balls need to be.
And
Please
that's
tell us.
metaphorically speaking.
Absolutely. No reference to sexual,
Absolutely
devices.
not.
Right. Yeah.
This is a non-gendered story. Um, I faked my way into video games, Jonathan Grant. Um, I uh, I was at the CES in Chicago and went there and got into that just to get their guidebook. This is before the web, and so got the book of everybody at the show, and it was also during the early days of desktop publishing, so created a colored trifold brochure about what my design company could do for you, and then sent it to 70 companies, and exactly seven companies responded, 10% return, and said, hey, we'll be at the winter CES in Las Vegas, come meet us. And so me and Ray flew out there to the Consumer Electronics Show, and I was the face, and he just stood behind me at 6'6" of him, and I just pitched people like crazy, and it was absolute bullshit. I knew nothing at all, um, and Sony bit. Sony went
Wow.
for it. Yeah, and so went to work for Sony. Well, what happened was we wrote a treatment for them for a game. They said, here's this game that we have that's floundering. And so wrote a treatment for them. And they're like, wow, that's cool. You should come out here and talk to us. So flew to Europe to Chester, England, the last Roman walled city in England. And I was in Wales, living in this guy's house. It was literally a hobbit house, right? Where he had a house in the side of a hill, right? So there are only windows in front. And I stayed with him for a couple of weeks, so did Ray, with him and his lovely family. And we're out taking a walk one day, and we're in a goat pasture in Wales. And I'm standing in goat shit with this guy, who was the head of the studio. And he was a real character. He said, so, how much? I said, how much what, Ken? He was the studio head. How much for you to quit your day jobs and do this full-time freelance for us? And Ray and I had talked about the dream of what if we were full-time video game designers, and we had said, "Oh, well, this is how much we want." And we had a number in mind. And so I said, "Huh, let me think a minute. I have to calculate." And then I just told him twice the number, twice Ray's number. And I see Ray starting to vibrate. And and the guy says, "What? That's more than I make." And I said, "Yeah, we're the talent." And he just put out his hand, and I shook it, and I said, "Could I talk to my partner for a minute?" And he went back, squishing across the poop into his house. And Ray turns to me and says, "What did you do, man?" So I got us into video games. And I said, "Hey, Ray, uh, what's a pixel?" And he explained what a pixel was. I said, "I've heard the term polygon. What's that?" And he explained that. I said, "We are absolutely fucked." And that's how I got it.
So
How'd that work
you
out?
know,
Well, funny thing. So later on, years later, when I I went to work at FASA Interactive with Jordan, during the interview, nobody asked me if I knew how to use a computer. Right? That's not something you ask, but I didn't know how to use a PC either. So I would work a full shift in the video game mines, and then I had this book. It was like PCs for Dummies, and I would stay at work until like midnight teaching myself what a C drive was and shit like. And everyone's like, "Who's that young go getter?" It's like no, he just doesn't actually know how to use a computer at all.
I mean, this just to me like, yeah, it's something we talked about on the pod before, but like the not asking for permission, right? I do think some of it goes back to when all of us are old enough that when we were kids, we could just kind of run around and do our own thing and be crazy, with no supervision, right? And I do think that that teaches you certain skills, like how to lie to the head of an international, multi-billion-dollar corporation about how much money you wanted to.
oh no, that
That's
was
true.
true. That was
You
true.
really did want that
Huge amount
money.
of money.
I want.
Well,
No, Jonathan, it's an important note. I don't lie. It's not part of my character to lie.
You negotiate.
So, yeah,
yeah. But to me, I think also the analogy that your video game career started in shit, and sheep shit, and God knows how much sheep shit we've been in together throughout our
it
careers.
may have attracted us together. I don't know.
Yeah.
Bullshit knows bullshit, my friend.
Here's what I want to know from the two of you, because as Jordan mentioned, you guys have worked together multiple times and been through more than one ringer together.
Yeah, yeah.
Was there's a certain I'm going to think of a nice way to, well, I don't need to think of a nice way because I know you guys well enough. There's a certain patina, right, that you get in the industry after a few years, and I think I would like to think that we all have it, but you guys have your particular variants of it. So like Mitch, you've got this sort of like, you know, now you're in this mode, this zone where I think I once referred to you on social media as like you were in your wise old rabbi era. But you've got this sort of like, stone monument vibe. Uh, Jordan, Jordan, on the other hand, is like, he's still, I mean, Jordan, you're still kind of, you've got your moments, I think, where you channel Mitch, but you've still got your golden retriever energy. And I'm, I by comparison, I'm still just a yappy dog. So, you guys, that energy, did you always have that together as partners, or is it something that came over multiple years in the industry? Like, talk about how from that young guy taking a flyer basically in the sheep shit to where you got to, like, talk to me, about that process and how you guys both have gained your seasoning.
I mean, I'll dive in first because you got to use dive in as many times as we can in the episode. And uh, I think that, yeah, Mitch's story in the sheep shed. Uh, is a microcosm of any creative person in an industry, right? And I don't think this is true just in video games or tabletop games. I think it's in all creative industries. You fake it until you can make it, right? You have to trust yourself that you're going to figure this shit out, and trust your creative instincts to jump into stuff that you don't truly understand, to be able to then have the opportunity to learn it, and to, I don't think anybody ever masters any creative art, but be able to become more predictable in your development of creative work. um and and that is a leap of faith, right? That you have to take, but it's not a one-time thing. It's like every project is that, right? Every project is leaping off the cliff on the belief that you're going to invent wings before you splat on the ground. So I think that's very much a microcosm of it. Um, I think in terms of energy, uh, I would say Mitch and I, part of the reason I think we worked really well together, is that we muster I would say our peaks of energy are at different points in a project. My peak
Wow,
of
yeah,
energy
that's
is very
awesome.
much in the beginning of a project, right? The clean sheet of paper is where I'm the most energized, and I'm providing the most value, right? And Mitch is one of the world's best closers, right? The ability to come in, I mean, not that he was not in the project, but be able to take the helm at the end of a project and pull the threads together, bring out the great parts of the project to bring them to the forefront, move the things that aren't working as well to the background, or get rid of them if possible. And to put that polish on the end of it, right? And that's an incredible amount of energy that has to be expended. It is one of those 80-20 kind of things, right? It's like that 80% of the energy is at the end of the project, even though it may only be, in calendar wise, it's nowhere near as long as the bulk of the project, but it is this incredible focus of energy at the end. And Mitch is the best I've ever seen at that.
That's very kind of you. It is interesting. I agree with you. Not that I'm the best, but I agree that we are that sort of reverse Pareto of each other. I think I'm using the term right. It's like you're the first 20%, I'm the last 20%. And in between, we have incredibly talented people that we've worked with that are really just, I don't know, just meatied up the game, you know? So, yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, that makes sense. The other thing is that, we're both vaudevillians. And so we just had this natural energy that just immediately clicked. There was no working on our relationship, right? Um, we just were. Although I will say this to be kind to Jordan, since he was nice to me just now. Um, the one of the great things that Jordan taught me was how to be a good partner, right? I had never had real partners before. I had always been like I spent a dozen years at Microsoft Game Studios, and that's not about partnership. That's about getting shit done in this morass. It's sort of like being a sumo wrestler and having to carry your game on your back and just hit people out of the way with your sharp elbows or
What's
whatever.
the famous Microsoft org chart where all the orgs are aiming guns at each other? Have you ever seen that?
No, but it sounds like Reservoir Dogs. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that wasn't my exact experience, but well, it was. It's just that I had the gun out first.
Right. You're very
I
quick.
was very
You are a quick
proactive.
draw. You're a very quick
Yeah,
draw. Yeah.
yeah. It's just like before you can start messing with me, I'm just gonna explain it to you now. Yeah. Not my favorite era of myself.
So
But that's the other thing.
you
Yeah.
guys, I want to pick up back up on that thread. You guys learned to be partners together at Hairbrained?
No, we didn't learn. There was no learning from my point of view. We just were. Right? Jordan's like, you want to be partners? I was like, yeah, let's do that. Because we were having so much fun together. Bungie had put us together to make a game, Crimson Steam Pirates, for Bungie Aerospace, a mobile title. And so I was working for Bungie at the time, and Jordan was independent. And about halfway through development, he's like, hey, you want to just stay together and make a company? I'm like, yeah, sure. Because it was so obvious to me that we were partners, right? It was so easy. But it taught me to trust a partner and also allowed me, and I think this is, I haven't really said this about you, so what the hell? Let's record it and I'll tell you. You know,
Okay.
it's okay. It's not spicy at all. There, that's Crimson Steed Pirates. The thing that I had been missing for years and desperately needed was Jordan's kindness, right? Which is very much lacking. It was lacking in my life, the idea of kindness. And I became a better person and a better game developer, a better leader working with Jordan because he allowed me to be kind. He demonstrated kindness. And I'm like, oh, good. And I just sort of drank from that fire hose, and was able to grow into a much better person after working with Jordan.
Well, I appreciate that. I think, you have to be in the right place in your life. When I had started I had originally talked to you about being a partner in a previous company,
Yeah,
Smith and Tinker. I wanted you to join there, and you and I spent a
that was
bunch
the
of time
second time.
together.
The first time was Mage Night.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, I asked you to come join
WizKids.
WizKids,
Right.
and you turned me
That's
down
good.
on that one. And then after I was starting Smith and Tinker, I again invited you to come and or I actually didn't invite you. And that was the surprising thing is we spent time together, and then I realized that you were not in the right headspace to come do it. Right? As I think I put it very undelicately to you, you had become bitter and cynical, and I
Hard.
was
You
like,
used
that's
the word
not the
hard.
energy.
You're
Hard. Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
And when you
And,
soften again, then we'll work together. But it was also Smith and Tinker, going back to Jonathan's org chart thing. I did talk to your leadership team, your vice presidents. I don't know if you remember this. Well, we went to Jitters, the coffee place, and I was with your senior team because we were talking about me joining. And as we were talking, as I was talking to these vice presidents, I just said to one of them, I don't remember which one, draw your org chart for me because it sounded dysfunctional. And he drew his org chart, the org chart of the company. I said, oh, you guys are former Microsoft, aren't you? It's like, yeah. It's like, you guys are fucked. You're not going to make it.
well, it's funny because yeah, no, they were former big company, but not Microsoft. Yeah. All right, there you go. See, can't have, there's
There
there's
it is.
there's
That's the
producer
important
Kevin
thing.
like, oh my God, we needed to have the Jitters logo because that was the
That,
important part.
no, that really illustrated the
Just
experience.
Yeah,
earning his
exactly.
paycheck. He's
Yeah.
just
As small as it is. Yeah, we can't really complain about anything he does.
Yeah. But
Um,
it is true. I had a heart and hardcore, um, really put my dick hat on for a while. And then,
well, the
yeah,
Microsoft,
toughed up.
you kind of needed to survive in what Microsoft was at that time.
Well, I was talking to a former art director of mine, Heinz Schuler, who Jordan had the pleasure of working with also. And I talked to him recently, caught up with him.
Oh, cool. I
Yeah,
haven't talked to him in years.
yeah. It was really delightful to talk to him. It was just kind of a relief because we talked about real stuff. And one of the things he said was that when you sold the company to Microsoft, sold Fasta Interactive to Microsoft, and that was sort of kind of a little nucleus in Microsoft Game Studios, that it was like taking these Midwestern boys and throwing them into this high-tech petri dish, this left coast high-tech petri dish, and just sort of throwing us in a way to the wolves. And then, you know, certain things start bubbling in the petri dish, and I became me, and he became him, and you became you, and stuff. So it was really weird. It was an odd experience. I remember the second week I was at Microsoft, Jonathan Spazzato came up to me and said, and he could tell I was not having a good time, and said, there are a lot of very smart people here. And I said, could you introduce me? I haven't met a single one yet.
I
That's
I
meant it.
love the evolution of the petri dish because I can imagine that. I've seen other people I've seen other people both at Microsoft a little bit and at other companies go through that experience. It's like I think the petri dish is a good one, but also the sort of underground pressure that creates different elements is a good metaphor as well because it's you never know what some of these, um, let's call them socially competitive corporate environments will do, will bring out in people.
Yeah,
And
that's exactly
yeah,
right.
yeah,
And what was interesting also in that it was, left coast, it was Seattle based, and I was Chicago. It's like, this is what you think Type A is? Let me show you what Type A looks like.
right. Yeah. I mean, I
uh,
remember I left Microsoft with a wound, and I don't think I weirdly didn't exercise that wound until I worked at Zynga, which is bizarre, right? Because Zynga in some ways was more, it was
Yeah,
definitely more insane than Microsoft, but yeah, somehow I managed to exercise the wound between the two.
that's crazy. Well, good for you, man.
I think
Healing is the real thing.
I do think that's really interesting though, that like there's a really interesting nugget there about you guys work together, you know, you went to Microsoft, Jordan spun off and did some things, and you, I think, you became kind of hardened, it sounds like, Mitch.
No question about it.
And 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 this industry does that to a lot of people. And a lot of people never come back from it. And so what, like, I'm just curious, what do you think about that, Mitch? Like, what do you think about what the industry does, the fact that people don't come back, and the people who do?
I can't say the industry does. I'm not sure that's fair. I'd rather say the people that I've met in the industry have done it. It all comes down for me to individual responsibility. I reacted the way I reacted to that environment. I mean, the environment was not toxic. It was just wrong. You know, Certainly for a creative, you know, environment, you got to be kidding. Um, I remember going into the green light meeting for MechCommander 2, and the green light meeting was getting me ready for Ed Freeze because Ed is gonna grill me. I'm like, all right, bring it, let's go. And it's like everybody, we had several pre-meetings before we got to Ed. About make sure that your slides are like this, and he likes page numbers in the corner of the pages that you pass out. It was all about that. Nobody talked about the fucking game ever, right? It was all about how to perform in front of Ed, and I'm still pissed off about it. And next time I see Ed, I got to remind him about this. Now, Ed was not guilty in this. As a matter of fact, it was Ed during the presentation. We're talking about stuff, and finally at the end, I get through everything, and two things happened that pissed me off. But the first one, the first one was at one point he said, is this schedule realistic? And I said, yeah, to the best of my ability, it's realistic right now. And he said, I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to Frank. And he was talking to the lead engineer, right? Because it's Microsoft and the engineers are the kings, at least at that time. And I'm just like, what the fuck is this? So, it was a delightful, first experience at Microsoft
I,
for me.
I think there's a natural tendency in large organizations when you have this kind of hierarchy and to do that. I had the similar experience at Disney, right, where we were in Disney Imagineering. We had a big project that we were going to review with the head of Imagineering, and these are expensive people, and that meeting was moved 4 times, and every time it was moved, we went back and spent much more money to prepare for it, right? And I kept going, "Well, why are we doing this? Why are we doing it?" And so when we finally had the meeting, right, and I, during the meeting, because I knew the guy well, and I turned to him and said, "Just so you understand how things happen here, the delays in this meeting cost the organization about $250,000, and here's why." And his eyes were like, "What?" Yeah, that's not what he wanted to have happen, right? But that's because everybody's so concerned about their performance and their chances for success. They keep you keep overreacting that way, right? And so yeah, it just gets. I don't know if it's a human tendency inside of a large anthill, you know.
But
Essentially, you just steep in an environment, and you just accept the environment as it is. And it's not healthy necessarily. Real fast, I got to say something positive about Ed Freeze, real fast, because in that meeting, he's the one who actually said, "Hey, you know what? I played your game and I noticed this. You know, why did you make that decision?" And I said, "You know what? That's a really good point." And I changed the design based on his feedback, and it really added value to the game. Yeah,
And yeah, I agree. I think that's the thing about people miss often when they think about Ed in terms of that organization is that he's a passionate and
yeah,
well-informed gamer, and he could really bring good critique to a title,
it
which
was
is
real
great. And
insight.
yeah, and often not seen in larger publishing organizations. So that yeah, I
Very
agree.
pleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
Remember, I had not exactly that experience. I've never met Ed, but I had a sort of similar experience to what you guys are talking about. At Zynga, healing my wound. Uh, I went into a pitch and it was a bad pitch, and we left, and we were sitting with the team talking about what we were going to do, and somebody said like, "Okay, well, Jonathan, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to win, and I don't care if I have to cheat. I want to win." And Steve Schreck, who you guys may remember from Microsoft,
of course.
he
Yes.
he was there, and he he didn't say anything at the time, and afterwards he pulled me aside and he was like, "Hey, dude, like, don't do that to yourself. Don't talk that way. You're
For Shrek.
you're you're not gonna do yourself any good with that kind of an attitude. You need to be thinking about making the game, not thinking about the process, and particularly not thinking about the cheating." And I like that. That really stuck with me years later.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I
Anyway,
remember when I worked with Steve, he was, God, I don't know how young he was. He was at Microsoft, uh, and it was the first time I think I remember being called old. I was, I was 40, and we were working late one night, and he very casually, I mean, it was not meant to be an insult, but he was like, "Man, how do you keep up this energy and work these hours at your age?" You know? And I was like, in my head, I was like, "All right, dude, I am going to work you into the grave."
Yeah. I had the same
So,
experience at Microsoft with somebody else from the central services team who said, "Man, I hope I have your energy when I get to be your age." Like, all right, Dick Nose. That's awesome.
but there's an unavoidable ageism in an industry that thrives on young people, you know, uh, and I think it is contributes to your earlier statement, Jonathan. You were talking about beforehand something Chris Taylor said, which is, you can tell the ones that were in it for the money because they left, right? So it's only us who are stupid enough to really care about the games and making games and the passion of it that are still here at this age, because it is an industry that really does consume energy, and it is harder to muster that energy as you get older.
Well, it's not only that, I totally agree with you, but also what happens is your life gets complicated with real priorities like children.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then it's like, well, can you work 24 hours a day and still be a decent parent? And, your mileage may vary.
I mean, I definitely I get that as a dad, but I just want to pull something out of that that's pretty important to me, which is I was listening to future friend of the pod, Bing Gordon, talk about game developers, and he said for years he was trying to figure out how to get game developers to listen to him, and he realized that the only real way was to play their game. And so, calling back to your Ed Freeze comment, like, Ed played your game, right? And what something that I saw and have seen in corporate environments as people age is they just stop playing games because they have a wife, a family. They've kind of moved on, right? Maybe they played games in their 20s and they've just kind of stopped playing games. And you're pitching them products sometimes, and you can tell they know very little about the current state of the industry other than some Excel charts they've seen. And I think that is where aging in this industry. Yes, there's an energy level, there's a commitment, but that I think is where aging in this industry really hurts us. And I think you can literally look at some of the big studio games that have come out for the last like 5 to 10 years, and you can see where that, or you can intuit where that is stung.
I completely agree, and I faced that challenge in my own life quite a bit. But it is part of that, I think, as Mitch said, it's how much time you can devote to it, right? Because when you're young, you put in your 18 hours at the office, and then you go home and you spend the remaining six, playing games to stay fluent. I think that that does get harder and harder to maintain. So yeah, I've definitely felt that challenge in my own life. And to me, what it means is you have to become a better listener, right? You have to be able to, really find people that you trust and enjoy and be able to pick their brains and try to capitalize on, on the learning that you used to be able to do firsthand. And now you kind of have to do secondhand, and pick your battles, and play the things that are most important to what you're working on. But yeah, it's totally a factor. I completely agree. Mitch, I want to talk about you making stuff.
What about
What,
it?
what I want to like, what are the parts that bring you the most joy when you're working on something?
Uh, Two things. The first is when I can see my fingerprints on a game, right? So in the games that you and I made, Jordan, you know, I can see my contribution,
Absolutely.
right? And I don't have to be in charge. I don't have to, that doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be my concept. It's just I can see my work, and more important, I can see my contribution. I think that's the right word choice. But far, far more gratifying for me than that is truly, it's really about enabling talented people to really grow in their jobs and to get their shit on screen. Um, that to me is the single greatest part of game development. I used to call it uncorking. There's a genie in everybody's bottle, and if you could just uncork that, what'll come out? That to me is pretty much everything.
Yeah, and you can see that in the in the quality of the work you've done, both as an individual contributor and as that team leader. I mean, at HBS, you were Papa Bear, right? I mean, and that kind of in-depth relationship with the team, it was incredibly beneficial to them,
What's
and to
interesting
this
is the
and to the
contrast.
studio.
I appreciate that. You're saying nice things to me on camera. I dig it. But, when I was at Microsoft, we talked about sort of that Mitch. And when we started Hairbrain, the interesting thing was there was no external pressure other than to stay afloat. And therefore, the studio that we created was ours and reflected our values, right? And I was able personally to become myself, to really embody myself, my own values, unfiltered and without shackles. You know what I mean? And that was the joy of Hairbrain Schemes for me is, it was our company. And that's just that,
Yeah.
you know.
So flip
How's
around.
that
Let's look
fun?
at
No,
Good
I
or
uh
just
ill?
want to. I just want to say something, and maybe I'll cut this actually from the ultimate episode. But like something I'm really realizing listening to you guys talk, because I didn't get to work with you guys at Hairbrain. I got to work with Jordan before and after now.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm really realizing, as much Mitch as I feel like you're saying Jordan had this, big influence on you at Hairbrained. Like I'm really realizing that the modern Jordan that I see now, it seems like maybe he's drawn a lot from Mitch.
oh
Because it
yeah,
is really
absolutely.
different working for Jordan now than it was before the Hairbrained era. So it's pretty interesting.
Let's interview Jordan then. Yeah, like, how have you grown as a
No, look
person,
at no,
Jordan?
no, no,
That's the key.
absolutely no relationship is one way, and I learned a ton from Mitch. All through our different working periods of working together, and especially at Hairbrain. And I don't do it anywhere near as well as he does, but I have definitely tried to become more of that, Papa Bear, more of that kind of nurturing leader. My my predilection is to just be heads down on the design, on the game, and as much as I love the energy of working with people, like my focus was always 100% on the game, not their careers, not their concerns. I was mostly focused on their contributions to the game.
That's accurate.
And I think over the course of the 40 years of my career, and a lot of it within the decade with Mitch was to realize how much I needed to broaden that lens and realize that the game is, or whatever the project is going to get better by spending more time focused on the people, not just their contributions to the project itself. So I've tried to learn. Like I said, I'm still nowhere near as good as Mitch at it, but I'm just a little better than I used to be. So I'm glad. At least I'm glad you noticed it. So it means that there's some progress.
That's pretty cool, actually, to hear. I'll take it.
All right. So let's flip the coin now. And like, what are the parts of the creative process of making things that frustrate you the most?
Frustrate me in the creative process. Um, the thing that probably bothers me the most is when the entire team isn't on the same page, right? And I think um, I've seen games and studios not put enough energy into communication of the vision clear enough, um, and checking in regularly, because people will go off and it's like you've got an area lead, the multiplayer person, or the metagame designer versus the level designer, and they're kind of making different games. And that's the thing that has frustrated me, and pulling people back in to keep them focused. The way that we did it on, for example, Shadowrun Returns, because we had so little time and so little money, was just to be kind of authoritarian. It was just go, 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 and nothing happened without our approval. It was
And
difficult
that
to
also,
create an
it was a
LA.
very small team, and that can only really work on a very small team.
Yeah, exactly right. It's all about the pirate ship, you know, versus, I don't know, the amoeba or whatever organization becomes. But yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think the industry is trending back towards smaller teams for sure. And that's why co-development is coming up. It's like you get this nucleus. It's kind of like the movie industry, right? Where you have a production team. It's like your Reese Witherspoon's team. And we're going to be making Pretty Little Liars and stuff like that. The creative team's the creative team. And then we bring in people that we need in order to get that vision on screen. And I've always believed that video games need to move that direction, and
Well,
now it has
the
to.
I think something we've lost in the last 10 years, 15 years, but let's say 10 for the kids. I think something we've lost is like the original really killer IPs, and then actually even beyond just single IP, multiple different IPs from the same group of people. It was like these little crews were either, the pirate ship crew is a good one, Mitch, or I always thought of them as like rock bands, where they had been through so much together. Um, Imagine expecting like you're going to throw a guitar player, you're going to hire a guitar player, you're going to hire a singer, you're going to hire a drummer, keyboards, whoever else, and they're going to produce a hit album their first time together. It just doesn't work that way, right? In like deeply creative enterprises, there's a seasoning that you have to go through as a group. And I think that one thing I'll just be maybe franker than I should. I think that a lot of the brands in video games today are basically running on stolen valor. It's not that, the people who work there aren't great. I'm sure they are. I'm sure actually they're probably some of the best people in the industry. But it is that original season team has gone and moved on. And so the brand identity doesn't necessarily exist in the same way, and you can't expect the same things from it. So I'm, where I am hopeful for the future is in the same direction you're talking about, Mitch, which is like, maybe this pirate crew version of the future where people get that quick seasoning together can kind of produce some exceptional stuff.
Well, we'll see. You know, the industry's changed pretty dramatically. When we put out Shadowrun Returns in 2013, I think 750 games came out on Steam that year. That was our competition. When we put out Battletech in 2018, something like 12,500 came out that year, right? And it's gotten worse since then. So the competition's pretty insane. But the other thing just about working together and seasoning, because I agree, seasoning is a thing, right? Especially with a core team. And with a lot of the games you see, you know, the spreadsheet from the publisher or, you know, the financier says, I need 100% ROI on this game, you know, like 200% ROI. I need to make my money back and make 100% more or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. This has to be a tent pole. Everything has to be big. And so your first time out together often is trying to make this giant amoeba horrible thing. And hey, what do you know? It didn't quite work right. And you don't get a second shot on goal.
Yeah, there is there
And the
there
thing
there is
is, it's all
no
about the number of shots you
growth.
get. What was that, Bill?
Right. I would say there was no way to introduce something small and have it grow, right? Over time, you have to come out, if you're doing one of these, AAA or AA, you have to come out so large and so expensive. But I want to push back a little bit because I've always felt that the film analogy doesn't work for making games. And I think for a couple of reasons. One, um, film is a much better understood medium with 100 years of additional context for how to work in it. B, it's a much smaller gestation period, right? Like your shooting period for a film is measured in weeks,
But your
not
pre-pro is in years.
oh yes, but that pre-pro is a very small team,
Yeah.
right? And I agree with that. But then so that's like saying, okay, we get our game designers and our art director, and that small group can work for years. Absolutely. But now when you go to make the game, though, right, as opposed to the film where you fly in, the best cinematographer, the best lighting person, the best film, you bring all those people in, they all have very well defined roles, and there isn't like the lighting guy and the sound guy or girl or woman or whatever, there isn't that much cross interaction that they need to collaborate that much, right? It's like they're each doing their specialty, and that all works to the vision of the director or
But
the
I think that's where
cinematographer.
we're heading.
Yeah, but
When you see the rise of code development, doesn't that sort of mirror that sort of thing? And it could lead to more standardization of roles and responsibilities.
I don't know. I think the challenge is that when you go to a video game. So let's say you've had your small team, you've got this great little prototype you've built just with this, 5-person team. And now you're going to blow it out and spend $100 million on it, right? And bring in this big team. That team, the resources and the sound design with the visual design and the input and all of that has to work together in a much more synergistic way. And that team, that shorter period of team is still going to be together for period of measured in many months, not in weeks, right? So they really do need to be a team rather than a film crew, which is, a shorter commitment to each other and to the project,
When I talk
Um,
about the band thing, um, a lot of it is about trust, and I think the difference between a game and a movie, or even and particularly an album and a game or a movie, is that there's just way more abstract concepts in play than in a movie, or at least modern movies. Um, and I think whenever you're dealing with abstractions, you start to have to rely more on your pattern matching back brain, and you're doing a lot less like concrete communication. And I think that what you see on teams where people have worked together is not only is there a natural understanding of each other's abstractions that just I think pattern matches better, but also there's just deep trust that this person who's going, Jordan's going to go off maybe on an abstract tangent or a historical one, as he often likes to. Um, and you, Mitch, just know that Jordan's going to come back to something. That he's not off on a wild tear. You know that it's going to be able to turn into concrete progress on the product. And I think that only comes with that seasoning.
I think there's definitely something to what you're talking about. And I agree historically that's true. But we are also in a tipping point, I think, for game development where it's going to evolve and it's going to change. And I'm trying to look towards a future where you can have your cake and eat it too. And so I think in this case, my daughter just did co-development on that Batman Arkham VR game, for example, which won like VR Game of the Year. And it was co-development, right? And all the problems that you're talking about, or all the synergies that you're looking for, existed on that project in that it was hard to develop trust, right? And it was hard to work together because games are hard to begin with, and now to add this new layer of how do we work together, these co-development companies, that's a thing. But I also believe that will eventually be worked through, and there will be trusted co-development companies that you go to again and again and again. You go, just go to, I don't know, blah, blah, blah company. It's like, they know what they're doing. And make sure you get this producer on it. And I can see that sort of future developing.
Interesting.
And maybe I'm just altruistic and, being positive, but I also don't have a dog in the hunt right now. So,
Well, I do think the the methodology of creating games and creating all content is changing so rapidly that it's going to increase speed, decrease team size, and that will change behaviors, right? And it may indeed lead to more of a film-like kind of situation, right? Um, you know, you can see a scenario where instead of that team trust of long term, this large team has worked together for 20 years. There's a small team that's been building its, incredible secret sauce AI generation tools for years, right? Which then, then that becomes the kind of that becomes the replacement for that human connection. Is that all of that's been poured into this magical generator, which then we then power it. I don't know. I mean, that doesn't sound like a very exciting future to me, but it's one that is conceivable.
yeah.
I think the thing that's interesting about what both of you are saying is, to me in this moment, is that we've been pitched now in the AI era for 2.5 years, whatever it is, that AI is going to empower creators and it's going to liberate creators, without actually saying liberate them from a team, but in some ways liberate them from a team.
Liberate them from life earning a living.
Yeah, well, and as though like liberating them from the team would make the product better. And I think about that genie moment you referenced, Mitch, because I've worked with guys who were game directors on multiple franchise level AAA or high AA hits, and they were brilliant in their own way, but they came out of their office, vomited their brilliance onto the team, and the team took that and turned that into a product. And that wasn't simply a generative process, right? It was a process of refining, editing, feedback, communication. And then sometimes someone on the team would just get a wild ass tear idea that would turn into, the center of gravity on the product. So I think that's the scary thing to me about, this idea that like the team is going to be principally replaced by some sort of a incredibly complex algorithm.
Oh,
I've just developed
yeah.
something I got to say. Forgive me, Jordan. I got to jump in here. I agree with you. There's no but coming. it's kind of bigger than that. And it comes down for me to a a devaluing and a dissolution of community, right? If you look at America, Jordan, our parents belonged to social clubs, right?
Yes.
The Rotary Club or whatever, and you were just part of this club. A lot of them were, of course, Jewish clubs for us, but you were always, everybody had these clubs they belonged to as sort of the center of social gravity. And I'll tell you something died inside of me during COVID when we started working from home. And I was talking to people through this prophylactic of this screen. And I stopped feeling it. I stopped feeling game development. And I was still effective, right? I still felt like I was doing a good job, but the joy left me because I no longer had that community. And with AI, that's where I'm going with this. You may get the knowledge of the community funneled into your thing, but you're not going to get the community, and you're not going to get the magic that I think you're sort of alluding to, Jonathan.
I think all of that is completely true, but I think also, and something I've been talking about with my kids, right, that we, I've been incredibly fortunate, and I think, I think it's probably, I'll extend it to you too, if you can tell me if you disagree. We've been extremely fortunate that we've had a career that we passionately cared about, right?
Mhm.
And for me, it was very much a live to work kind of thing, right? And that, in retrospect, is not really healthy for a lot of people, right? And the fact, and the premise that the community created at work became the surrogate as work took over our lives for things like the social clubs, the churches, the other places and centers of community that were true in previous generations. As our generation became just obsessed with work, well, the only place for that community became work, you know. So, and I think that was both a benefit and a detriment, right? If we
Totally
had
right.
reserved if we had reserved more time for our social lives and for our creative lives outside of work, then I think we would have had more community legs to stand on, and that would have been healthier for all of us.
I have to agree. It pains me to agree because I see it, right? And I see it now, just like we were talking the other day, Jordan, that, I suddenly have hobbies for the first time in my life almost. It's like, what is that? My creative energy is going into my hobby as opposed to, uh, some product that I'm making. It actually took work for me not to think of it as a product, even though eventually it'll kind of look like one. That's not the point behind it. So yeah, and as you've heard me say a million times, I'm all in on this project, right? It's like, that's it. There's day shift and night shift, and then there's the sort of third shift of game development. And I'll just work all of them to get to the quality level that it needs to be in the time we have. That uncompromising, I don't know, risk my heart health on this.
Quite literally, in your case. I mean,
Quite literally.
yeah, that was always super scary to me. And
Yeah, it
I'm
turned out to be scary to me too eventually.
yeah.
Oh, oops. Like, the way you live your life is actually wrong.
So I want to follow up on this a second and talk about this theme of resiliency or perseverance,
But yeah,
and on two scales. Kind of what we were just talking about, which is within a project, within a studio or a game, r- maintaining the appropriate amount of energy, enthusiasm, and passion over projects that can span years is an incredibly difficult thing to do, and it's one I'm not very good at myself. What advice do you have for others about how to do that, or what's your experience
yeah, I don't
with
know
that
about
perseverance?
advice. That's interesting, that whole rabbi thing that Jonathan was talking about. I don't give advice anymore. I just share what worked for me and didn't work for me, and then you can take it or leave it. I don't give advice anymore. But for me, there's this, I was going to say George of the Jungle, Tarzan. And apes brachiate from tree to tree. In other words, they swing from vine to vine, and that's how they travel in the canopy. And that's the metaphor for me for maintaining my energy throughout a game product. There are so many negative forces that can happen, so many frustrating things. And the way that I have survived and thrived and kept my positive energy is latching on to any positive event that happens on a game. Somebody creates a cool moment in a level. It doesn't even have to be the whole level, just a cool moment, right? Is enough for me to get excited and to share that with the rest of the time. Did you see what Hazel did in her level? Because it was amazing. Just this one thing. Everything else needs work, but this is cool. Everybody watch this. And sharing that enthusiasm, and it's all genuine. It's got to be genuine because people can smell bullshit a mile away. Right. And genuine is the new punk rock in 2025, right? So, but that was the thing. It was always any positive event that I could latch onto allowed me to swing to the next branch. That's how I've done it my entire career. And it's not
I love that
seeking the
analogy.
positive, it's just
Yeah.
noticing when it happens and just waiting for it. And sometimes, honestly, I've swung back and forth. Remember a pitfall or whatever? You just swinging back and forth at the end of that thing. You're like, I hope another one comes soon. And
Just
you don't want to
clinging
be
to
the
Hazel's level. Thank God for
yeah,
you, Hazel.
yeah. That was the deal. That's exactly how I
No,
did it. That's how I've always done it.
I mean, I think that something that inspired me coming into this episode, thinking about talking to you, and knowing some of the history between you and Jordan, but also following you for years, um, and why I wanted to also talk about resiliency was like we as creative people we are faced often with just a barrage of bad news. Um, everything from I don't like your idea, it sucks, to now increasingly market pressures as well, right? I mean, there are always market pressures, but these are unique and different market pressures. Uh, and I do think, I mean, the branch, clinging to the branch is a really good one, um, because, you know, it's something that I want for if there are young viewers of the podcast, as a dad, but just as somebody who cares about the industry, like I want young people to be able to internalize that, like, yes, you are seeing barrages of bad news, whether it's about layoffs or, your title's not getting greenlit or not getting kickstarted or whatever. But that, you know, there are ways for you to move beyond it, and there are branches. You got to find your branches to cling to, but if you catch them, hold on to them and you will get through it. Um, I mean, what do you guys think about that? Like, what do you're both have more games industry experience than me, and have, no offense, have more seasoning. What do you think about for young people looking at this industry, whether they're in it and, feeling pushed out, feeling maybe even squeezed, forced to look elsewhere, or young people who want to get in the industry? What do you think? Uh, how do you give them more branches, or what's your take on it in general?
Well, I just gave a talk along with my daughter, the game developer I was telling you about. We just talked at the Academy of Interactive Entertainment here in Seattle, and we were asked to by by the school's leadership because they have real problem placing students in jobs, and the students are getting pissed off because they expect the school to help them. And so I came in with Amir Satvat's data that he was nice enough to share with me. And I just said, look, 13 out of 14 of you are not going to get a job in game development within the first at least 22 months uh, of getting out of this school, right? You're just not. And you need to accept that reality and then deal with that reality. And then Emily took the second half of the talk where I gave the data and she said, so here's what to do with this data. And it was also based on some of the stuff that Amir's talked about, which is, you know, uh, don't over specialize too early. Everybody, because if that job doesn't exist, that job doesn't exist and you're screwed. So you've got to be more of a generalist. but also get an education that has transferable skills so you can go into the workforce and gain experience and stuff like that and wait for your shot while developing yourself in a way that will transfer back to games. When Jordan and I really first met, I had been with Blockbuster Video for 7 years, something like that, right? Developing my skills as a people manager, right? I was a people manager long before I was a game developer. And it turns out, especially in the industry at that time, that was a superpower because nobody knew shit about
Absolutely.
managing people. So that's how I
Absolutely
was
true.
able to get a leg up. It's just because I understood how to talk to humans. So that was sort of my advice to the students that I talked to.
Yeah. And the only thing I'd add to that, um, is I think the world of film changed with YouTube, right? Because now there was a platform for everybody to be able to demonstrate their passion and their skills in a low cost way. And it became, the modern entryway into the film business, right? People didn't make money on those videos, right? But it created opportunities for them. And I think, you know, games are moving in a similar direction, right? They're going to have to, for most people, they're going to have to start as a passionate hobby, right? To demonstrate your skills in public, and build on that. And it may only ever be a hobby, and as long as it's one that's creatively rewarding to you, come to terms with that and enjoy it, right? Enjoy making it, and for the, you know, dozen players who enjoy your game, realize you made their lives a little better, and created a little joy for them. Um, but that's, I think, going to be a lot of the way that people, find opportunities as the tools become more and more democratized and available. The onus to use them shifts to the people to demonstrate their capabilities with them before you get the job. Didn't used to be the case, right? It used to be those tools were inaccessible, so you weren't expected to have made a brilliant game. You were expected to, have the potential to make a brilliant game before you got the job. I think now that onus has shifted completely, right? It's shifting for individuals, and it's even shifting for studios, right? That's the whole premise of like, we're not buying your game until it's finished, right? We're not funding your VC. Yeah, VC is not funding your company until you already have revenue coming in, right?
Yeah, don't
The
talk
own
to me about vertical slice.
Yeah, exactly. The onus just keeps moving more and more down to you as passionate individuals to build it with sweat equity. Um, and so I think that's going to be more and more of the reality. Now, the quality of tools that are available are frankly quite phenomenal, right? And as much as the flip side of the AI, which is going to lose so many jobs, is also putting that power into your hand as an individual or a small group of people to use it for your own passion projects. So use it, right? I mean, bring your visions to life, and that is, I think, going to be the way that you take a passion and turn it into a profession.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something very profound and also very scary in there. Considering, a job is what helps you start and finish a project, right? A paycheck. And so, what you're talking about is starting, which is hard enough, and finishing, which is exponentially harder, in the absence of any of those things. And I think that is, yeah. What do you think, Mitch? I agree that that's kind of the challenge on the field.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm not
I
saying
think.
it's fair or it's right. I'm just saying I think
Oh,
that's what's going
absolutely
on
not.
today.
Yeah, yeah. Nobody's suggesting that you think this is the way it should be, but I think when we were growing up, there was a monoculture, right? Everybody saw the finale of MASH. Everybody could talk about the latest Simpsons episode because everyone had seen it, and through YouTube, through streaming services, whatever, the audiences have diversified like crazy and fractured and fragmented, and therefore making your own shit, you're going to find your own audience, and it's going to be small, but it's yours. right? And you have to accept the smallness. And I think it's a matter of scaling your game, right, to
Exactly.
the size of your audience, et cetera. And so these quadruple A games that we're talking about, we'll see what happens. They may have their audience, but eventually somebody breaks out and everybody thinks that's the model. It's not. It's just it's the fashion. But we'll see.
I agree. I think this concept of kind of micro audiences, right? I mean, looking at games in a similar way that you look at Etsy, right? Where, okay, it isn't my full-time gig. I have a job. I come home and then I make these beautiful whatever lace doilies, and it's creatively exciting to me, and it's a nice little revenue stream for the handful, for the dozens or thousands of people that I entertain and contribute to. Yeah, I think that's likely where we're going.
You know, what's funny is I remember being in a conference room at Gas Powered Games with you, Jordan, when we were had the closet, their storage closet, when we were starting out together. And I remember being in this room, and it was like 2011. I'm pitching Shadowrun Returns Kickstarter, and the pitch was, look, we're just going to have a small audience that'll be very loyal that we can monetize deeply. Yeah, that worked. But, but it was just, but it's like, look, this is our segment and that's good enough for us. Right. And that was kind of the idea. Just build
Absolutely,
that
you're right.
community
Absolutely.
and build that segment. And it turns out, that seemed prescient now.
I agree. I agree. I think it totally will.
I mean, I think, I had a conversation with also a friend of the pod, who I think I know Jordan knows, but I think Mitch, you must know from the Steam Pirates days, or from Crimson Skies days rather. Kevin Hanna. Kevin, we actually interviewed Kevin. We're going to release that at some point. But Kevin has, in addition to being a game developer and now working at Meta, he has been working on documentaries for years, and has started to engage with YouTube, thinking about YouTube directly as more of his, direct output, as whatever the distributors or whatever the equivalent organizations are for films, kind of do the same things that publishers are doing in games, where they just do less and less for you. They're like, yeah, we'll get you on the, the distribution channels, but we're not, going to particularly do that much for you on the marketing side. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. And I do think that it's like, it is kind of back to the indie band days. You're going to have to put up your own posters. You're going to have to go talk to the bouncers. You're going to have relationships, maybe with your own merch guy or whatever it is. Because no one else is, everyone else is just going to take your product and charge you a fee against it, and not really do that much for you. So it is interesting to think about, the band of outsiders.
Yeah, there's a trend in publishing too. I can't remember, shadow publishing, I think they call it now, where it's like, look, we're not gonna give you a bunch of money, is we're gonna sell you publishing services, you know. So it's going the way you're talking about, Jonathan. Yeah. I think that's pretty interesting. And Kevin, if you're out there, Kevin Hanna, if you hear this, I want to make a documentary. I love documentaries. Let's make a documentary about something.
Yeah,
Don't
he's
encourage
awesome.
Kevin. He's got so many pots on the boil. Every time I meet with him, there's another pot. I'm like, what are you, Jordan Weisman?
Well, that's for him to handle.
Uh, yeah, no, I really enjoyed our conversation with Kevin. That was awesome. Well, Mitch, last thoughts. Anything you want to throw in? Some of that rabbi
That's
wisdom.
interesting. Yeah, that wisdom thing. Uh, uh, yeah, that work to live, live to work thing is definitely on my mind right now as I develop hobbies and stuff. It's like maybe I should get a job. Uh, well, actually, what's interesting? I was telling Jordan I've got this little project that I've been working on alone, and thinking of it as a hobby changed things in that, how some people will write a book, and it took them 5, 6 years to write a book or whatever. Um, but there it is. It's the thing they've always wanted to make. That's sort of where I'm going is like, I've got this idea and it's just like, oh, well, I just don't give a shit how long it takes to make this, right? And I'll just make it whenever. It's like, I don't feel like watching TV. I'm going to work on my thing. And that's pretty interesting to me. It's just like, no, it's mine. It is exactly what I want to make. I think about Rick Rubin, the music producer, and he wrote this book on creativity that may be called The Creative Act, I think. And if you haven't read it, take a look at it. It's a primer. It's like this big, but it's pretty cool. And one of the things he talks about is how your art, and I'll use that term, and I think games are art, and I think we can agree
Absolutely.
on that. He's like, don't worry about other people's judgment, what other people think, right? And I think this is how we get to really great games, etc. If you can do it this way, it's like your art is yours, and you wouldn't let somebody read your journal and judge it. It's your journal. It's like this is what you think, this is what you're doing. And so I'm interested in that concept now. I've always been a commercial artist, right? And just like, look, we're doing this for money and stuff. But right now, where I'm coming at it is like, what do I have to say? And what's the story? Oh, it's going to be a story. What's the story I want to tell with the characters I want to bounce off of one another? And who knows? Maybe it'll be cool just because of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
Well, that's that's the positive side, and I think the liberation for some of these, kids coming in the industry we were just talking about is like, if you care about games and they're your art, and the industry is not giving you any money, and they're not even spending you, as in times past, any fantasies of any money, then you don't have to give a shit what they think. You can just listen to yourself. You can listen to your heart and your inner voice as an artist, and there is no failure, right? This is something Justin Gary said is, when we talked to him on the pod, there, there's there's no failure if you're making something to make it, as long as you finish.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm working right now with Seattle Indies, and we're creating a new conference for independent game developers here in Seattle. So you don't have to fly to GDC to see the people you would have seen anyway. They just all flew out the same place, uh, you know. And we're going to be doing micro talks as one of the things. It's like, oh, here's a 10-minute talk. I think this is going to be mine. You know, I think that's the message. And it's a message. It's not the right thing, but here's a way of looking at it. If you don't look at it as a commercial thing, it could become a great commercial thing. That sound
Yeah, no, look at,
upside down?
art made for art's sake, if you will, is often the one that communicates the best, right? And it was the most torturous to make, right? But it has,
I've had some fucking
it's
torture.
yeah, exactly. But it's, it has, to use that overused word, it has the authenticity of the author's voice.
Mhm.
And I think that's the upside, right? That's the upside of all these incredibly powerful tools, is that they hopefully will, give birth to a lot of visions and stories and characters and gameplay mechanics that would never have seen the light of day in a larger corporate structure.
When you think of the word torture, I got to do this real fast because Jordan, I've been through some real shit, right?
Yes.
We both have. And, making the games that we made together that were products of love, right? They were really, really hard to make. We had a pace that was insane, yada, yada, yada. But it was never torturous.
Right.
It was just
Hard,
stupidly
hard,
hard.
but not torturous. Yeah. Yeah.
It was torturous for me every time it was torture. And I could think of two big products that were absolute torture for me. And that's where my judgment was supplemented, or pushed down by other people's judgment. And I had to deal with their judgment
Yeah.
and work around
And,
their judgment.
right. And the
And
arbitrariness of it.
and by the way, both of these products that I'm talking about failed. And
Yeah,
maybe I
of
had something
course.
to do with that, but I think also that situation of having to push my own judgment down in favor of some mega corporation or corporation, just that was part of it. It goes back to just make your own shit.
So,
Well,
so
thank you.
I wanted to ask you this question before we wrap, and I referenced it before we started filming. I've watched from afar, either over Jordan's shoulder or through the lens of social media, while you've been going through some of those shitstorms, whether they were torturous or just really hard projects, Mitch. And I remember. I think I've seen you post adapt or die a couple of times during some of those journeys. And then my favorite one is when you would post the Tropic Thunder GIF, the survive, just the face saying survive. Without diving into any spicy details on why you were feeling that way, what do there are many people at many different stages in their career in games and beyond games and creative enterprises all over the place. Having gone through like those kinds of battles, what would you say to somebody who was about to or who was in the middle of one of those sort of slogs?
It does come back to adaptation. Yeah, I've got it tattooed on my arm. Improvise, adapt, overcome is right there, right? And
Wait, come on,
you know,
show it for the camera again. That's awesome. Wow.
all right. I got that for my 50th birthday at Harebrained Schemes. And, you know, when having been at a megacorp, et cetera, a lot of people think that Darwin, right, was about survival of the fittest. And that is absolutely incorrect. That's what dicks think. Instead, the species that can adapt survive, right? That's the secret. So figure out what space you're in, figuring out how to navigate that space is the way to go. But, anyway, that's the big thing
Uh,
for me.
I love that uh, touch about Darwinism and adaptation and evolution. And I was just watching a dog documentary recently, and there the scientist said actually you could argue that it's the kindest is the one that survives the most, right?
Yeah,
And that dogs, the reason they've been so successful with us and us so successful with them is because of the shared kindness and the support back and
fascinating.
forth. And I do think that kindness is a trait that people again an environment that looks at machoism and kind of like right makes right. Actually, I think kindness is a long term survival asset, not a
I
liability.
think there's really something there. I went through a personal evolution, right, with that macho bullshit because I had to deal with a team that was all sort of boys club infighting, and the only way to get them to work together is to top dog them, right? Which is horrible, right? And all of my success came through kindness. So, yeah, if we end this podcast on kindness, I'm in.
All right. Well, we'll do it. We'll end on kindness and thank you for being so kind to take the time and talk to us. And it's always a pleasure, off camera and on camera. So
Cheers.
thank you,
Yeah, good to
sir.
Yeah,
talk to
thank
you both.
you, Mitch. Always, I have been nagging Jordan to get you on the show since we first started thinking about it. It's great to talk to you and hear some of your hard-won beads of wisdom. So appreciate it.
Cheers.
So, is there anything you wanted to shout out, Mitch? Talking about your indie micro conference. Is there anywhere people can go to learn more, or anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah, if you go to Seattle Indie's website, take a look at Slice, SLICE. That's Seattle Loves Indie Creator Expo. I think it's something like that. And it's the Wednesday before PAX, right? It used to be PAX Dev. That's gone now. We're replacing it. It's going to be at McCaw Hall. It's going to be a really nice venue. We're lining up ton of roundtables and speakers.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about it. It'll be our inaugural event. So, crawl, walk, run with it. But a lot of positive energy.
Yeah. Excited to attend his endless adventures. And, if we can be any help, just let us know.
Well, that's awesome.
We'll put a link in the show notes. So if you're watching, yeah, check that out. We'll make sure there's a link so you can go and learn more. So thank you guys. Thank you, listeners, watchers. We do really love feedback. Actually, as we said on the previous pod, Jordan likes it when I read the feedback and tell him what it says. So, but collectively, we do love feedback. So please leave us a review, leave us a comment, leave us a rating, no matter what it is. Just let us know what you think, what you like to hear, and whatever. How are you feeling? So anyway, thanks everyone. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Mitch. And we will see you next time.
And thank you, Jonathan.
See you.